The iPhone 7 hits at an interesting time. Android, especially with Samsung, seems to kind of be at the height of its popularity, with the iPhone falling behind in public mindshare. But what we like to do here at gameranx is take like a regular traditional phone style review and really break down the tech and talk about like the perspective for somebody that plays video games. I know that might not really make sense, but we've tried it before with the Samsung Galaxy S7 Edge, and now we're going to do it with the iPhone. Sure, a lot of people consider people who play games on their phones not to really be real gamers, but everybody plays a game on their phone to pass the time, so we might as well break down what's new with this iPhone 7. The only thing is, in terms of new features for the gaming side, there's not really a lot going on. I'm gonna try to avoid the marketing speak, but it really is, the most powerful iPhone yet, at least in terms of raw speed. It has a Geekbench score of over 3,400 and 5,600 for its respective cores, and believe it or not, despite this being a dual-core phone, it does stack up to the S7 Edge in terms of these numbers. The 64-bit A10 Fusion chip is 50% graphically faster than the A9 chip from the 6S. And the iPhone 7 definitely may have less RAM than other phones out there, but this thing can still push some pretty beefy games. The new marketing term they've been pushing is console quality games, and while games do look and run very well, I'm still not really totally convinced that they're console quality games. I mean, come on. But I do think that large jump in power is worth noting because the iPhone 7 doesn't really try to do much innovation in any other areas, so it's nice to see this actually get a real good stat bump. One thing I did pick up on is that the phone does get much warmer very quickly. While it's not the hottest running phone I've ever used, it does get warm very quickly, whether you're just doing little light casual gaming or if you're doing really intense stuff. But I think it is worth noting that the phone doesn't get insanely blazingly hot. It also doesn't explode in your face, which is a bonus these days. Now, in terms of battery life, Apple says that for the iPhone 7 you can get up to 12 hours browsing on LTE and up to 14 hours on Wi-Fi. And those are good numbers, but they're also in a perfect world scenario. But what I can say after using the iPhone 7 for quite some time is that this is the first time with an iPhone that it feels like there's an actual real noticeable jump in battery life. While the plus size models have felt a boost for a while, for the main iPhone, this is the first time in a while that it feels like there's a real noticeable battery improvement. I mean, we've been using this thing on full brightness all day, playing games, filming it, leaving it on, playing music, stuff like that, and it's only at 58%. And that's after non-stop usage. iOS 10 is simple, and it looks nice and pretty, and it runs probably the best on the newest phone, of course. And I'm not going to go into individual details of the software, but I think it is very funny and worth pointing out that the Game Center thing, the whole Game Center functionality, is noticeably toned down. They made it more of a streamlined, lessened experience, and there's not even an app on the home screen for it anymore. So I think it's funny because Apple is doubling down on graphical gaming power, but they're easing away from the whole Game Center social media game playing thing that I don't really know if anybody really used. It's also worth noting, since I am talking about games here, the new Messages app is redesigned, and there's a lot of different stuff you can do. You can download apps to use within the Messages. Most notably, you can play a few little silly games in there like Words with Friends. So if you want like the ultimate distraction to a distraction, I guess that could be for you. And with iOS 10, of course, you have Apple's App Store, which to me personally, I think is curated a little bit better than the Google Play Store, even though in the past years, they have both leveled out in terms of content. You don't really see too many exclusives just for one phone or the other, but I just like the design of the Apple App Store a little bit better. Once again, the camera is great and has received great improvements, and while I'm not the biggest like iPhone fanboy as I used to be, I do think the iPhone does have the best camera always. That's just how it is for me. I think we need to talk about the Taptic engine for a second, because this is essentially Apple's version of haptic feedback, which of course, yes, Android phones have had some sort of thing like that for a while, but Apple's take is a little bit different. If you've used a newer MacBook with the Force Touch click pad, it's very much like that. It's a motor on the inside that vibrates to simulate clicking with the home button. The home button doesn't actually physically click anymore. This Taptic engine is integrated into the software and has used a lot for games, but I think it's almost to the point of it being a little distracting. This weird click vibration is used a lot for games when traditional vibration should just be used, if you're asking me. So sometimes it does make experiences feel a little bit weird, but what I did enjoy is the new stereo speakers. I think this is a much welcome thing to the iPhone. The speakers are of course under the bottom, but the other speaker comes out of where the earpiece is. So while it is a little weird with sound coming at you from two different places, I think it's very interesting because you can feel the sound now. You feel the sound reverberating through the phone. Again, of course, for you actually people, that is a feature that Android has been using for a while. And I will point out that the sound is a little bit more tinny, that some people will definitely pick up on. I think this is mostly because of the waterproofing or water resistance that does this effect to the speakers. I noticed that as well on the S7 Edge. But since I am on the topic of that, I know it doesn't really have to do a lot with video games, but the water resistance is nice. Like the S7 Edge, it's really awesome if you're outside at a bus stop playing a game on your phone, it starts raining, you can keep going like a badass. Everybody looks at you and thinks that you're crazy and your phone's gonna catch on fire, but you can rest assured. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, because I think honestly this might affect people who play games on their phones more than anybody else who uses the phone. The headphone jack and the lack of the traditional 3.5mm headphone jack in a replacement for Apple's lightning cable is a weird choice. Now, I am very much into the whole early adopter thing. I'm into the ripping the band-aid off and just enjoying the new technology, but I don't know if this is necessarily the best way to go about it. Apple does provide a dongle that is 3.5 to lightning that I think is nicely designed. It's very small, it's very simple, it's cheap. You can buy more for $9, and I think, not to be an apologist, but I think Apple is just planning for people to get these little adapters and have them permanently attached to their old pair of headphones. That being said, of course, it does still add an extra step to the process, making things a little bit more of a hassle for the user. Not only that, but if you are someone who maybe is playing Pokemon Go and your phone is always hooked up to a battery charger, but also you want to have your headphones in if you're like, you live in a city or you're on the subway or something, this is going to be a pain in the ass for you. This is going to be really annoying because you're going to have to get an extra dongle and more attachments and more wires to put up with it. Am I all for the future? Am I into trying a new standardization? Yes. Am I into Apple taking over that standardization for themselves? No. One thing I did notice though with the new headphone jack plug is that sound isn't noticeably greater or anything. I didn't really notice that much of an amazing improvement over 3.5mm. Apple just really seemed to have used it to save space in the phone and add more room for battery and the Taptic engine, which the battery, welcome, good job. You did a great job because there is better battery life in this phone. So if you can't tell, the iPhone 7 is definitely in an interesting predicament. As for me, someone who bounces back and forth between Android and iOS all the time like a crazy person, I think this is the first iPhone that actually, it seems a little bit flawed. It's not perfect. While it is a great phone and there's a lot of improvements, there's just, seriously some issues. Obviously, the headphone jack being a big deal. If you're an iPhone person, is it a good phone? Yeah, sure. If you're an Android person, is this a bad phone? Yes, it's the worst phone in the world. But also, I'd like you to go back and check out my S7 Edge video because that had a lot more talking points in terms of features for people who play games on the phone. There's a lot of little things in there that make it easier for people to play games. The iPhone 7 doesn't have a lot of that other than raw graphical power and battery life, but I still think that's worth noting. That's pretty good. But that is the iPhone 7. That is what I think you need to know going into it if you are curious about it. And I do want to know what you guys think in the comments about this phone. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot to debate, especially, of course, with that headphone jack. Do you think this is the iPhone to jump into, or do you think Apple's next phone is going to be the better one, as rumors may suggest? Let's talk about any of that iPhone, Android stuff down in the comments. I'm looking forward to starting a war with you guys. You guys know the deal, though. If you want to see more videos like this, more before you buys, clicking the like button helps us out a ton, and we really appreciate it. Subscribing if you're new is a great idea because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.